Mistakes are going to happen. Otherwise, you are not challenging yourself or moving forward. Many people, myself included sometimes, view failure as negative outcomes to fear and avoid, rather than to accept them as part of pushing boundaries. Hello Turtles, I'm Tim Bodette, and I just completed my first year as a full-time indie game developer. During the year, I made mistakes that you can avoid by learning from my efforts. Lesson 1. Identify weakness. The biggest issue for an indie dev is getting their game to the target audience, and I am no exception. This is by far the weakest link in my adventure, and even Accelerate being a good game, no racing fan will buy if they have never heard of it. It is easy to blame the lack of sales on things like being unlucky with social media, or the number of games being released today, or competing with AAA releases. Truth is, it is hard to promote a game. I have read, watched, or otherwise consumed oodles of material on how to market not only games, but for other industries as well. This is something I do on a regular basis to try to understand the rough concepts, and still I remain quite baffled. In the middle of November, I sat down and brainstormed actions I could take to share my game with the world. This was not easy, and it highlighted a few vulnerable parts of me. In the end, I picked a few ideas to work on, but I was also rewarded by going through the process. As intimidating as it was, it helped me focus on making meaningful improvements. It will be a long time before I feel comfortable promoting my game, but I will use this process to identify and enhance my abilities to make this adventure a success. Lesson 2. Business is hard. Not everyone is trying to make games as a business, and there is great joy in creating games as a hobby. However, anyone trying to make money from sales should put a business hat on to increase the possibility. In the last few months, I got a little lost in the weeds building my own dream project. On the surface, this is great. However, as a business owner, I had to zoom out and look into what consequences that will have. Being an indie game developer is my dream job. That job can lead to a variety of different games that are a lot of fun to develop. Or it could be my dream project, which carries a certain amount of risk. This was a fork in my adventure that took a substantial consideration as I needed to commit to one direction or the other. My dream project would take me several years to meet the expectations of the target audience and would be all or nothing. Committing to other games halts my dream project, but I can make more of them in the same time period. This reduces risks and improves the chances of my dream job being a success. I will dive much deeper into this next month, so subscribe to tune in. Lesson 3. Projecting the future. Keep the business hat on, as this next lesson is a great exercise for avoiding potential traps before they spring. When planning a project, or in the midst of a checkup, this mental exercise can save you from future pain. I don't have a catchy name for it, but what you do is simply time travel into the future. What? What do you mean you can't do that? Well then, mentally fast forward through time until the project has been released, or roughly when you plan for it to be. Then begin asking the questions, why did the project fail, and how could that have happened? Write these answers down and continue the exercise to brainstorm possible failure points. This will help identify what risks you are taking and allow you to address them before they become big. Lesson 4. Losing control. For the first half of the year, I was working with Ultimate Games to bring Rally of Rockets to their browser-based social gaming platform. This partnership reduced my risk of creating a multiplayer game by the platform handling servers, matchmaking, and to a small degree, player acquisition. This allowed the design of Rally of Rockets to focus on multiplayer without requiring a single-player mode. That reveals the positive influence the partnership brought to the table for me. It should be clear that any relationship has give and take, and compromise is often needed. When you are working with others, a portion of your control is removed. You may have to compromise on your vision, add new features, or adjust priorities to make the other party happy too. There are times where you will change your process or design to fit the needs for your partner. This change is not always negative, but it may be disruptive or unnatural to you. Finally, there is always the chance they may stop working with you for whatever reason, including a change in their own priorities. For me, this happened at the end of June, and Rally of Rockets was cancelled because it no longer made sense to work on, even late in the development cycle. I had no contingency plans for the project. Adding a single-player mode wouldn't work, and the multiplayer servers, matchmaking, and player acquisition was unfeasible for me alone. If you are partnered with someone, enjoy the benefits, but keep a backup plan ready just in case. Lesson 5. No Scope Challenge. For months leading into the start of 2022, a small update for Accelerate was planned. This would be a little extra content with maybe 1 or 2 features to push the game a little further. Upon starting the update, the idea is expanded into a nice DLC pack. As development continued, the scope increased even further because the project seemed ahead of schedule. More about this in the next lesson. There were a few issues upon the release of this expansion, but choosing the correct type of product was sus. Initially it was just an update, but then it turned into a DLC, and it should have been a standalone game. Problems started from not knowing how much I could finish, and continued when I overcommitted too late in the process to make it a standalone game. As of today, the winter expansion is no longer a DLC product, but a separate game, Accelerate to the North Pole, which was changed in December. Going forward, it would be favorable to choose the product type and stick with that choice throughout the duration of the project. This may warrant extra planning before just jumping in. Lesson 6. Untrustable Trajectories. As just mentioned, the scope of the winter expansion was looking really good. I completed far more than expected in such a short period of time that I increased the scope and aimed for 30 new tracks. This was, however, just a false burst of speed, since the tracks still needed set dressing and obstacles, along with balancing and setting goal times. This caused everything to slide wildly out of control, and you can hear more details about it in my other video. The point here is that the trajectory of progress is not linear. It can be faster and slower at various moments throughout the project. However, I don't regret changing the scope, and with the information I had, it was the right call. If you want to change scope mid-project, I highly recommend you do so by using a safety barrier. This safety barrier gives you an exit strategy to keep the original smaller scope should it become overwhelming. In Accelerate, I could have achieved this by working on the original 10 levels for the DLC, and then once completed, continued with the other set. This separates the new scope and would have allowed me to backtrack when everything slid. Lesson 7. Trust the process. At risk of contradicting what I just said, you should trust the game development process. This starts with the idea generation, building a prototype or proving that you can hit your targets, then working through the alpha for less risky features and beta stages to fill in the content. This process works very well, and I used it 4 times last year. I needed to find a feasible idea for Rally of Rockets, and find the fun. There were several ideas from Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Tag, and in the end, I wound up with Keep Away. Then, for the expansion, I thought of different environments, a mall, desert, winter, tropical, and felt that winter was good, but really risky. To avoid that risk, I blocked out 2 days to play with snow physics and to see if sliding friction could be fun and controllable. Nailed it in 2 hours. The process worked for me in 2 other projects as well, and I highly recommend using it. Lesson 8. Question your efficiency. Have you ever been pinched for time, running a little behind where you expected to be? This appears to me my constant state of mind on my projects. Last year, I learned a great mechanism to increase your chances of meeting an approaching deadline when feeling behind. Ask yourself, how could you finish if you only had half the time? This requires looking from at least 2 different perspectives. How can you speed up the development, and what unfinished content can be removed that would not be desired by the target audience? I learned this lesson a little too late, but it would have helped me on Accelerate to the North Pole when it slid beyond the original scope. Had I been asking myself this question, I would have removed the collectible snowmen with no negative side effects. If asked early enough, I would have also made sure to set up set dressing prefabs before working through half the levels. This question can be asked often to keep your efficiency high. Definitely ask it when planning a new project, not necessarily to shorten the timeline. In fact, do not shorten a timeline based on the answers to this question. But if you cannot find a way to do the project in half the time you've set aside, then you do not have enough time to complete the project. High risk of missing the deadlines. Lesson 9. Watch project timelines. It is best for efficiency to work on fewer projects at a given time, as it reduces change in your context. Sometimes this is a little necessary, and other times it gets vastly out of control. At the end of the year, I had multiple projects starting or ending or otherwise being juggled. It was clear that this caused inefficiencies in my progress, but it was unfortunately necessary by a poorly chosen release schedule. For this reason, in the future I will avoid placing the start and end of projects too close together. I usually allow for a transition month where I wind down from one project and into the next, but in the span of 3 weeks, I juggled at least 5 different projects, 2 releases, and preparing an amazing start to 2023. Avoid this by giving yourself that transition period when releasing a product. Lesson 10. Commit to events. Telling your community when something is happening is critical to building hype for that moment, whether that is the release of your next game, or a small update, or even running a playtest. I bumped into this issue when planning a playtest. I never committed to a specific time or day and announced it as the end of the month until about 5 or 7 days before the event. This makes it difficult to coordinate with players and fans that wish to participate. I got lucky and almost 30 players still showed up for that playtest, but obviously committing to a specific date and time sooner would have made that much easier for everyone. Therefore, I'm putting this lesson into practice by telling you, my YouTube community, about the Sunday shift before it starts, which I believe is a first. Experience the life of building games as a business in the Sunday shift starting January 8th. I will take an idea from concept to release over 12 Sundays so you can watch it from start to finish. Learn to leverage tools, hire help, and make decisions for maximum efficiency. The Sunday shift will be live on twitch.tv/Timbodet every Sunday starting 7 a.m. Eastern. Get inspired and motivated to work on your own games. Please share this video with others, do the thumbs up and subscribing thing, or leave a question below. It may get answered in a future video. Until later, turtles, have a good one. Check out this video to see how much money I earned and spent on 2022.